The Higher View, welcome. It's Monday. And today, July 20th, 2020. Lots of 20s here today, right? I think that's a good sign. Yeah. We have some amazing ladies here. Usually I'm introducing like one person, but actually I'm the audience today, really. I'm the in-studio audience. We have three amazing women that are really combined in one vision, and this has to do with youth and teens, emotional health, social health, just the whole 9 yards, how that's incorporated into education. I know right now this is like a critical time to be addressing this, since our kids have been kind of tossed all around in regards to school, what happened with COVID. They don't know what's getting ready to happen. Parents don't know what's happening. Unfortunately, the statistics and how they're affecting kids right now is not favorable. And so you moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, aunts, uncles, neighbors, all of you that are watching can do yourself a favor, do your community a favor, watch, take notes, become informed, see how you can participate in helping to protect our youth and our teens during this really tumultuous time. And then just some, then we have all the children and the teens that have all kinds of other issues going on in their life besides COVID. So I really feel like this is going to be a super important, deep, intense show for you today. Take notes. I know I say that all the time, but this is going to be probably one of those that you're going to take notes and then go back and listen to again and fill in the blanks. And enjoy the fact that I'll probably be fairly quiet today. Also, if you have questions, plug them in the comments. I'll probably have plenty of time to reviewing those and sharing those, because I'm a learner here with you guys today. So everybody's familiar with Julie anyway. She's on our show every day as our PR director, but in her outside of online life, she has an amazing center, the Elrod Center, and pours her life into this very issue. So, Julie, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm going to let you introduce, Michelle's been on before, but introduce her anyway in case other people missed that show, and Marian, and take it from there.
Yes, I am so excited about this interview. Michelle, thank you for joining us. I know last minute I just messaged and said, hey, could you come join this talk? Because I think it just would be so good for what Marian is going to be discussing today. And I have the honor and privilege of introducing Marian Stiegeler to the Higher View community, who is such a force to reckon with. When her and I met in July of 2017, little did we know that there was going to be a holy collision and some dream that I had that really I did not have the experience of doing. Marian had the other piece of it. And so it's just been an amazing opportunity for us to come together and look at the depravity in our own community with the youth. Now, Marian's a licensed professional counselor. She has more letters behind her name that I can even mention. It makes up for my 0 letters, is what I love to say. She's really the brains behind the Elrod Center, which, for those of you that don't know, it's a creative arts and therapy center for kids. It's in memory of my father-in-law, Rod, who took his life in 2016. But again, little did we know what God was going to do with that tragedy. And Marian has said yes to this assignment because in her own personal life, she has seen how, abuse and trauma, what it can do to a young child. And she had a mission to accomplish. So Marian, welcome to the show. If you could share with people just a little bit about who you are and where you come from and where this passion comes from, we'd love to hear it.
So I'm a licensed professional counselor, like you said. I wasn't always. I did get my undergrad in psych, but I went into business doing sales and marketing and stuff for a good number of years. I'd always known, though, that I was built for this and there was something missing and I was supposed to be helping people. As a young child, I was always trying to help everyone. And, I just had that helper gene, that drive to do that. I also, as a young child, experienced trauma that I never told anyone about or got help for. And so I made a lot of decisions in my life out of that trauma that I never would have made had I healed. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I actually went to see a counselor and healed from that. And I am now the whole person that I was supposed to be the entire time, completely whole and different than if anybody knew me back when I was younger. And my experience gives me that kind of passion because I know how plastic kids' brains are. I know how they can heal so much faster than we can as an adult once our brains are solidified. I mean, they're continually changing, so it's not like they stop. But once we hit that 24, 25 age mark, our brains are solid at that point. So if we can get them young, if we can get them while they're kids, while they're teens, and really help them to heal from anything that they've been going through and teach them the skills to be resilient when life hits so they don't develop trauma in the first place, then that's a win-win, and they're going to have a healthy, happy life. And that's where my passion comes from, is trying to do both of those, prevention and treatment.
So talk a little bit about the play therapy center idea that you had when you were working for another organization, your dream.
Yeah, so I interned at CAFA, Christians as Family Advocates. And while I was there, I was able to study under Carolyn Rexius, who is amazing. And I really developed kind of a skill set. And it was at that time that I knew that I really wanted to do a play therapy center. I didn't really know what that looked like yet, but I knew we needed it in the community because there wasn't a lot of people that had been trained in play therapy. And I wasn't even fully trained yet. I had just got the basic skills down. But that's when the dream and the vision came to me. And I knew that someday I was going to start a nonprofit. Of course, I thought it was, 10 years down the road. Little did I know. Yeah. So that's where the passion came from. Play therapy is really, really powerful and very misunderstood. It's not just playing. I have a lot of parents that I work with that I have to deprogram because they come in thinking that I'm just sitting down playing a game with their kids. It is so much more involved than that. I'm modeling behavior. I'm modeling reactions and appropriate social reactions. I'm working on specific skill sets with their brains that are deficits. And I'm doing it in a way that's fun. And we all know when we have fun, we learn better, and non-threatening. So for instance, I use the game of life for ADHD, the one with debit cards. And the reason I do that is because it works every single area of the executive functioning. They work on delayed reward, tracking, working memory, which is the ability to string things together to reach a goal and remember where you were in that process and what specifics you have to do. Internal time clock, delayed reward, impulse control. All of these things are all being worked on while playing one game. And in order for those to be worked on, I have to play in a specific way to really develop those skills. But again, it looks like we're just playing a game. And then I model it for the parents and I teach them how to do it. So they're playing with their kids at home the same way. And all of a sudden they're seeing all of these issues just disappear before their eyes. And it's incredible. But nearly every single parent that comes in, I have to find a creative way of explaining and showing how this works because they just don't understand. And they think that I'm just sitting there playing a game.
Right. Well, and I think that is, what you're talking about, just to teach the play therapy and what it looks like. Not to mention, I know your heart is about the holistic side of the child, the whole nucleus of the family. Talk a little bit about what you're doing, because yes, you're working directly with the kiddos, but you're also incorporating some teaching principles into the adults so that they can take that. So then they become obviously the replacement of you.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is cycle myself out. I don't pretend that these kids are going to be absolutely perfect when I'm done. They generally will be at the level where they're not needing a diagnosis anymore. But that doesn't mean that life is done, because they're going to reach a different developmental level. They're going to have different issues that come up. They're going to have different needs. So what I do is I psychoeducate the parents on child development, the kiddo brain, how their processes work, and what their behaviors are saying, instead of just my kid's having a tantrum. Okay, well, this is what's happening in the brain. This is what's going on in the body. And this is what the actions are saying. And this is what the child needs. And so I do that, but then I also teach them about further development down the road and what they're going to need as that child develops. And then they practice those skills. Then I model for them what I'm doing with the kids, and have them be practicing that at home, practicing it in the session with me, empowering the parents, normalizing, so that they realize that it has nothing to do with them not having, not being good parents, or, that this is across the board. This is an epidemic that we have. Everyone's talking about the pandemic, but we have an epidemic with the kids that is so much more profound. And this pandemic is sparking conversation that needs to happen, but the epidemic is what really needs to be addressed with these kids.
Yeah. So Michelle, when you're listening to Marian talk, I know with the work that you're doing, obviously you're in a different area. You're, in Michigan and we're in Oregon. Have you seen this kind of creative thinking outside of just kind of the counseling center in your own area?
Yeah, so if you're referring to the play therapy and looking at that whole child, yes, it's really taking the evolution of our knowledge around trauma and the brain, neuropsychology, and beginning to look at the whole child. So nationally, there's such a push for how do we look at the whole person? How do we bring spirituality into the conversation too? Because there's so much healing that comes when we focus on the healing of an individual, body, soul, and spirit. And so even in my own private practice, that's something that I love to incorporate, the whole healing of a person. So when we refer to body, soul, and spirit, we understand that early trauma that Marian was referring to really impacts our physical bodies. And we have to understand how our minds have been impacted by our experiences. And Marian, I love what you said, because it's true. When children have early trauma experiences, it changes their identity. It changes who they know that they are. And so as life happens, we can go back then and unpeel those layers of belief systems that they've taken on. So I may take on a subconscious belief as a child in the middle of my parents' divorce that I was the problem. And then I carried that belief system with me throughout life, that I'm the problem in every conflict that comes up or in every experience I have. And even though that's not true, and even though that may not be the case in a situation, because we carry that projection with us, it becomes our life narrative. And all of a sudden we have this suitcase of life narrative that we're carrying, and it's the way that we view ourselves and we view life. So in treatment, as we begin to unpeel those layers, and so just as Marian was saying, when we begin to do this work with young people, early intervention, then there aren't these lifelong or these years of developed patterns of behavior or neural pathways in the brain that then people take as their pattern of functioning. So Marian's right. It's when we look at the whole person, we begin to strip away those belief systems that are a false narrative, and then we rebuild the identity of who you were, who you are, pre-trauma experiences. And then, of course, the movement in spirituality and really understanding how much we are spirit beings, and there's that whole level of healing there. So this is the trend in clinical treatment, but it's a trend because it's effective, because we're bringing together now all the knowledge that's been developed out of years of psychological practice, and now we're saying this is the full picture of what we have to bring healing. And play therapy is absolutely powerful, because again, we have to bring those subconscious, we have memory experiences and we have emotional experiences that come together and they store in the back of our brains. We have to bring them forward and release all of that emotion, what I just described and explained, and help kids reprocess. And then Marian was really moving into the conversation of, and teach. We have to reteach then how to function in healthy ways outside of that stored emotion.
Right.
So yes, you know, it's really good work that's happening, and it's life-changing work that you're doing, Marian. Mm-hmm.
You too.
Yeah.
What I love that you guys are doing is when you're talking about bringing the parents in, and then teaching them, because I think that in and of itself is going to be so healing for the family unit as a whole. Because you know, if a parent has a child that has, you know, whatever behavioral issues as they're looking at it, because they're not recognizing, you know, the root of it, helps that parent then connect with the child and connect in a way that is actually helpful. So, I mean, most healthy parents, you know, are wanting to be able to connect with their child and be helpful, like see healthy results.
Yes.
So then you're helping the parent work through their issues that they were probably like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible parent. I don't even know how to raise my own child, you know, and then the child that feels so disconnected from the family because of what's going on. And half the time they don't even understand what's going on inside of them other than something's wrong with me, you know? And so now it's working with both sides of that, not just the child, but actually incorporating the parent into learning how to deal with these and create their own positive results in the home. I just think is absolutely amazing. That's like huge.
And not only that, but we work with the school too. So we work with the teacher and the administrator. Sometimes we go into the schools and work directly with the child in the area that they're having issues with, so we can have an intervention within that 5 to 10 seconds of the behavior. We can work on the trigger of whoever is triggering them, help the teachers with gaining skills, do some professional development, while still working with the child and the parents. So it really is the entire nucleus of the kiddo, depending on the situation that we're working with. With foster families, we work with the bio parents and with the foster family, and we teach skills on both sides. We teach communication, boundaries, all of that, so that the foster parent and the bio parent, especially if there's reunification down the road, can really have some healthy communication and some skills. It's very, very vital that each of those pieces are addressed, because each of those pieces are so influential with the kiddo. And then there's also another thing, just really quick, that I'd like to call expected chaos is what the term I've coined for this. I give everybody in the family something to work on. And the reason I do that, even though the one child is my client, is because whenever we have a family unit, we all have our role. It's established. We know it's expected. Even if it's dysfunctional, we understand what we're supposed to do. I'm the helper, or I'm the savior, or I'm the whatever. This is the problem child. I'm the one that comes in and I'm the perfect one, right? So everybody has a role. And when that child begins to improve, all of a sudden, everyone's roles are thrown into chaos and they're not expecting it. So then they end up having issues. Even though this child is getting better, then the child gets triggered, it gets worse again, then all of a sudden therapy doesn't work. So what I do is I give everybody something to work on, so they're expecting to change. And then when that child improves, the other ones are already changing their role. And it really helps the entire family to grow and improve together.
That's good.
Well, and it makes me think too, and you're talking about, you know, you're basically working with the authority figures, the adult figures in the child's life, and looking at the active younger generation, the millennials, and the Gen Zs right now, in let's say areas like Portland, and their response right now to authority. It really makes me wonder, you know, how many years over the past couple of decades have, parents thrown up their hands because they don't know how to deal with, whatever the child's going through, teachers doing the same, basically authority figures doing the same thing over these kids' lives. And now as adults, all of that's, coming out in this aggression towards authority figures. And so, like, this is just how my wheels are turning. I'm like, you literally right now are building a foundation so that what's being experienced right now in a generation, it's like, talk about preventative measures, that 20 years down the road, these children aren't going to be expressing themselves the way they are right now.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, when we're hit with situations where we're not used to big emotions and feelings, and we haven't practiced them on a small scale, we're not going to be able to practice or process them or experience them on a larger scale. One of the things that parents do because they don't want to see their children hurting is they don't let them feel. Oh, it's okay. You don't need to feel like that. Not a big deal. Not, distracting them. Here, have a toy because you're sad. You can have this toy, or you can come over here and do this. Instead of saying, that's really hard.
Yeah,
that feels really hard right now. I'm so sorry you're going through that. I'll be right here with you while you do.
Yeah.
Right. And then they're practicing those emotions and processing them in a healthy way on a smaller scale. So then when they get to those big feelings, they're not using violence and just all this destructiveness to process them, because they have that practice, that emotional intelligence, that resiliency. And that's part of that preventative piece. That's just a small piece of it. In the school system, it's so broken because they're telling the kids, everyone's a winner, but then they're setting them up to fail.
Right.
And so it's this mixed message without them having those pieces in place to process it. And and then the curriculum is actually advanced for their developmental age.
Yeah.
The brain can do certain things at certain ages. It just is. Some brains develop a little bit faster than others, and obviously not all are created equal. But there are stages of development where certain concepts can be understood. And the curriculum, at least in this area, I don't know, Michelle, but the curriculum in this area is far too advanced for what the kids can actually entertain. And then what happens is they're not getting the information. They're getting upset. They're looking down on themselves. They think they're dumb and all of these they don't know how to process that emotion. And we have kids running through the hallways, flipping people off, tearing stuff off the walls, having complete meltdowns. These kids in the schools are just, they don't know what to do about it. And it's not just the curriculum. I mean, there's a number of things going on. That's one of the reasons we have to really work with the school system and really help them on a school-by-school basis, because each one has its own climate, it has its own issues and its own ways of working and processing and specific things that can help make it a little bit better.
So are you referring to curriculum in general for all students, or are you saying the curriculum for children of trauma is to?
Oh, no, all students. All students. The curriculum that we use here in Oregon, they're teaching algebraic expressions to first graders. They're not having anyone learn times tables or anything like that. In kindergarten, they're doing, they're given multiplication tables and expected to understand that. They're having them try to read at a level that is extremely higher. They're having them write full essays, like 3-paragraph essays in first grade. It's absolutely
crazy,
mind-boggling.
So I know, as far as like on the stats, education-wise, 50 years ago, approximately, we were like number 2 in the world. Now we're like number 27. So you think that what they're doing is trying to cram in more info versus working, like actually looking and seeing the holistic children and why we're going down in the stats. That seems to be their solution, like cram in more info. Is that what you think is happening? Or?
That's what, I think they're trying to teach to the fastest developing, which is, the top 5% of kids that can actually get this. And then the rest are struggling to try to process. And then they're just passing them through. So they're not allowing them to have consequences for not trying, because many shut down and just don't. They give up. And by the time they're in middle school, they can't even read because they've just given up, and the classes have passed them by. Because they've just been passed along with their grade. And if they don't have the fundamentals of that level, they're not going to be successful in that grade. And so you're getting into middle school and high school with some kids that can't even read basic first grade books. And they're expected to then adhere to the curriculum in high school with getting D's and F's and the expectations of the diploma, the high school diploma. And it's just unfair. It really truly is unfair.
Right.
In my opinion. Sorry, this is just my opinion.
Yeah. No, it just
What
seems
about you,
like...
Michelle? What do you see in your school systems?
Yeah, I have maybe a little bit of a different perspective and approach. I do agree that we have to look at the role of parenting, as there's so much modeling that takes place with parenting. And what we have to understand is the trauma brain. And we know a lot of the research tells us that trauma is generational, intergenerational, right? Not only because it impacts the DNA within our neural pathways, within our thinking. So we're passing on certain more predominant DNA in the way that we think and respond. But also that typically, because of behavior, we will see patterns within a family where they're exposing children to maybe the same types of trauma. And also we could have that conversation at a spiritual level, right? So there's sometimes a mix of what's going on. And so then you see children who, just as you said, have not developed the emotional intelligence to respond and engage in healthy ways all the time. And we're generalizing, right? So this isn't in every situation. But often what we see in patterns of generational trauma, this is the truth, that there's a lack of emotional intelligence in the development of that. Because as a parent, if you've experienced trauma and you haven't developed the ability to recognize your own or grow your own emotional intelligence, then you can't teach that and model that to your children. This is why addressing trauma from the roots is so important, because now we're seeing generations out. I also will often say, I see it and understand it in the evolution of us as human beings, in the sense that, in the 1950s, for example, it was okay to stay in abusive marriages, or to have, there was maybe sexual abuse going on in families, and it wasn't talked about, period. Or you didn't leave the marriage, period. Now, then you move forward and you have a generation that says, we're not staying in this type of abuse anymore, but it's all or nothing, black or white thinking. Now we're looking at generations who have a better understanding of the brain. We have more understanding of these concepts of emotional development. And so we can teach to that. We can teach what it looks like to recognize feeling in your body. My heart is beating fast. I feel worried about something. And then how we teach how to really understand what's going on in your heart and your mind. And so then taking that deficits of emotional intelligence and also the development of emotional intelligence, and you fast forward, just because you were talking about the education system, and you bring all of this whole, everything we're talking about into the conversation of the education system. And I'm careful to kind of, I like to stay in my own lane, in a sense, with the education system, because I get it. There's so many facets to it that they can't handle everything, and I don't want to blame, but it is true that we have a system that really sets up some dysfunction for kids, in the sense that we're not teaching them and supporting, not always able So I'm generalizing, but most of the time we're not always able to teach them and develop that emotional intelligence, which is why you see the big move of social and emotional intelligence, because we have clinicians being called into school systems to say, help us with the behaviors of these children, but it's hard to help with the behaviors of the children when there's not an integrated teaching of emotional intelligence. And unfortunately, because of the way that our American society is set up, our children are being taught and are with our school system for the majority of the day, sometimes more than they are with parents. So now we do have to look at the responsibility of the education system. And really what you were talking about, Marian, is this understanding that the trauma brain really does develop differently. And so there's such a halt in the development of logical and cognitive functioning, and that emotional intelligence, or the emotional functioning, the right brain really takes over. And so we have children of trauma, and now you see, I laid that whole foundation to say, they're kids who have generations of that trauma in their homes. So we have children of trauma whose brains have developed differently and who need additional support, or who we have to look at from the neuropsychological perspective and say, what parts of their brain are underdeveloped? And so when we just teach at them, but we don't understand as a system that we're looking at now generations of underdeveloped brain, that's when we start coming against a wall. And we have amazing teachers and amazing administrators that want to do better, but they don't always know how to. And that's why we're starting to merge now these concepts of, we can't just bring the therapist into the school and say, fix this kid, but we have to begin to really merge what our education system looks like, and how our teachers are equipped to really work with our kiddos who have these brains that do look different. Now, I do believe that our brains really, that we were created with the capacity to think and grow, and to grow equally. But I also understand that when you have the conversation of equity and equality, that you do have to look at, what does early brain development, what does that early stimulation in a child, when we experience trauma or we have lack of nurturing, how does that really impact a learner's ability to grow their thinking and then to function at a typical high stress level in the classroom? So it's really about what's going on individually for each child, and then how we begin to see them through this lens of trauma and really understand the impact that trauma's had neurologically, and then we see the behavioral symptoms of that neurological impact.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's part of, go ahead, Mary.
So, and to that end, there's a lot of barriers to services, right? So there's a lot of barriers to helping those kids. Number one, the system is set up to be reactive rather than preventative. And so until it's at a level where he diagnosed, a kiddo can't even get services. And if a school does hire a therapist, they have to then work with kind of in a triage sense with the worst case scenarios, and those kiddos that can learn these skills and prevent additional trauma and undo the trauma, like you were talking about, trauma brain, are kind of swept aside because one person can only do so much. We're trying a pilot program, I call it, a new program, where we're going to be partnering with the schools in the various districts here, because we're using interns and training the interns in how in child development and the kiddo brain, and how to do play therapy and work with canine assisted therapy and different therapy modalities. So we're actually going to be introducing them, and each of them is going to be assigned a school 1 day a week where they actually go, and we're partnering with the schools directly. So we get consent to treat sent out with the paperwork at the beginning of the school year, and parents sign that if needed, their child can see a therapist within, with just a verbal okay. So that cuts that red tape, right? Because all that paperwork and all that stuff out of the way. The other piece of it is, because we're partnering with the school, we are not doing anything with insurance. We don't have to diagnose. We don't have to provide all that documentation, although we will document because that's part of what we do. we always have to document what we're doing, but we don't have to go through all the hoops that we would otherwise. And the school counselors can then assign us, and this is not for those kids that are diagnosable. This is not for those ones that already have issues that need an actual therapist long term. So what this is designed for is situational crisis. Those kids that are having sudden changes in behavior, that are suddenly having issues, that is out of the ordinary, that may have had a family member die, they may have had a dog die, they may have been bullied, they may have had any number of situational crises, it's still very raw and going on at the very beginning of it. We're going to get in and see them for 4 to 6 sessions of brief therapy, heavily skill-based, heavily emotional intelligence-based, address the situation and teach skills to overcome that and future ones at the time, thus preventing a mental disorder from occurring and increasing resilience. And so our goal is that if we can get to those kids on a preventative level before they develop a disorder, while assigning therapists to have therapy, go through the whole process, and help treat the ones that already have developed a disorder, then we're actually attacking this from both sides, and we're preventing disorders from occurring while treating those that already have disorders and trauma and all of that. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, talk about the creativity. So we know, we've talked with Fred, of course, and just the dance and the movement and everything. But how we've been able to integrate that into the schools and what we did at a local high school and just the response with the coloring. I think that we have to be so creative right now because these kids, like we're talking about trauma, you're forcing these kids to learn, and then they have trauma. Maybe they don't know what they're going to eat when they get home, or they just saw their mom fight with a boyfriend, and they're coming to school already all angst up. And then we say, oh, by the way, you need to learn. And so it's like, what can we do creatively to get them kind of leveled out before they have to learn so that they're emotionally, ready? And I know when we were talking to Fred, he does, he would do a dance class, and it literally would be the thing that kids would look forward to because it wasn't the academia. It was like actually taking care of their body holistically. So talk about how we've been able to incorporate kind of the creative arts, into what we're doing at the center and into the schools.
Julie, can I
interrupt
for just a minute before you go into that? I just want to clarify that there's a difference between when we use the word trauma, and so I feel a high responsibility to make sure that we clarify this for our listeners. So trauma is really, the trauma brain occurs when we're moving from situations of, oh my goodness, something big and scary happened, to there becomes a disrupt after the brain is unable to settle brain chemicals back into a typical state. There becomes a disrupt in the flow of the brain chemicals, and that becomes the new norm for the brain. So for listeners, just because something negative happens, it doesn't mean that every child will experience trauma or that they will have a trauma brain. We can also talk about the brain and really all of these concepts that we're referring to from the perspective of toxic stress too, and how toxic stress or ongoing very stressful situations without adults can impact the brain. So, and then we can talk about like typical, difficult, scary situations that occur for kids. So it's important for us to clarify here as responsible clinicians that trauma is such a word that's used so much all the time right now that we do have to be careful that not every difficult situation can be labeled trauma, but most of what we're talking about here still applies to all of the situations I just described.
Right.
Go ahead, Marian. Thanks for letting me kind of insert that.
No, I think it's really important to clarify because you're right. The word trauma has been thrown around so much. And when I think of trauma, I think of a rubber band ball. And every experience that we have is another layer of rubber band that's going on. And when there's a trauma, that rubber band doesn't go on quite right. And then after that, every layer that's on top of that is then different than it would have been if there wasn't a warble in that rubber band ball. But every experience does not create that. And I'm glad that you clarified that. That's one of the reasons for the pilot program, is to help prevent some of those from actually occurring with early prevention, early intervention. But resiliency and emotional intelligence have a huge factor in whether that's going to happen, which is why we do the creativity and the creative classes. And we do a lot of preventative creative classes here, or at least we did before COVID. We did dance classes and art therapy and music and just painting and sculpting and all of these different ways of expressing oneself when you don't have the words, and integrating healthy coping strategies, emotion vocabulary, just the building blocks of this emotional intelligence. And then we are taking that into the school system as well. So Julie, you were referring to when we did the coloring at the local high school during lunch. So we came in and in the busy, bustling hallway where everybody kind of accumulates during the lunchtime of this high school, we came in and we used growth mindset coloring pages and smelly markers, the good smelly kind, as well as colored pencils and stuff to allow the kids the choice. But you would be shocked at the number of high schoolers that came over, and their nonverbals, it was amazing. When they came over and they sat down initially, they're extremely tense. You could see the anxiety, the stress, just all of that in their body. And by the time they were done coloring, they were laughing, they were loose, they were relaxed, their shoulders were lower, their jawline wasn't clenched. And it was just, it was great to see this happen in the moment with all of these high schoolers just during lunch doing a coloring page. And then we also got to go in and do some art therapy for a 4-week session at a local middle school. I wasn't personally there for that, but I did get, I created the actual projects they were going to do and got feedback from the therapist. We had a therapist that went and did it. And the school was just floored. They were so grateful and absolutely loved it. When I'm working with kids, with teachers, I'll actually teach them like a mindfulness, but fun, creative activity they can do to help settle the kids' brains, for lack of a better word, and bodies before they start the school day, so that they can actually be ready to learn. Not that all of them wouldn't, but like Julie, you said, we never know what somebody's going through or what chaos they're coming from, or even if it's not chaos, they might have had a bad dream. And they might just be focused on that and just not able to settle. And so it's really powerful. I love seeing it when the teachers start incorporating little dance times in between sessions of work, and fun games for their teaching styles to help the kids learn, and just creativity, creative ways of doing science. You know, all of that is just so amazing. I love seeing that.
We'll talk about the what we have at the center to help with the somatic therapy. I don't know about you, Michelle, but we are not allowed to do any kind of touch therapy here. Our board does not allow it, but you and I both know that trauma lives in the body. We have neuron clusters all throughout our body with dendrites that remember these negative emotional states, and they continue to create physical responses until those memories are actually addressed, and the glial cells can come and trim off those dendrites and get rid of them and clear the toxicity out of the body. So since we can't do touch therapy, even a massage therapist who's a therapist, a licensed counselor, is not allowed to, believe it or not. We came up with a creative way around that. We got a fancy, really great massage chair that has 67 airbags, and we use that when the kids are triggered, and we put the kids in there, and it works those memory states out of their bodies. And you would be surprised, the kids, they don't know, some of them have never felt those areas in their body before. And some of the airbags actually kind of feel like human touch too.
So it's really fun to see them. I'll have some kids come in super squirrely and they're like, I need the chair, I need the chair. And they'll run straight to the massage chair and they'll go in it for 15 minutes and they'll know when they're done. So it might be 5 minutes, it might be 15, but they'll know when they're ready. They'll know when they're done.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to see when they get back out. They're not squirrely, they're not fidgety, their bodies have completely calmed down, and we're able to get to work. And it's really fun to see. It works very well with teens, especially teens that are experiencing suicidal ideation, because when they're triggered and they're experiencing that, when they go into the massage chair, it's able to work some of that out that's being held in their body. And then we can work on some CBT and DBT. For those of you who aren't clinicians, that's cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. Very powerful for helping one control their emotional state, change their thought process, have skills to deal with issues like anxiety attacks and things like that. So it's really, really an interesting concept, and I have no idea how I came up with it. I think that was the Holy Spirit driven, because I don't think I could have been that creative on my own to develop any of these programs, actually. It all just kind of flowed on my fingers. I'm like, where did that come from? Okay.
Yeah, I love that. We know that body sensory work is so powerful with the trauma brain, because again, when we can hit certain points and access points in our body, we can begin to stabilize out those brain chemicals. So that's really what's happening in the description of what you're referring to. And we can still use a little bit of touch therapy here in Michigan, but through the perspective of occupational therapy. So
I see.
So there is a big movement nationally with occupational therapists within schools to be able to understand trauma, because again, we know through occupational therapy that there are certain ways that we can manipulate the body to help bring a relaxation to the brain chemical state. So I like to partner with our occupational therapists to really teach that your work is super important in the conversation of trauma, and then helping teachers know. I mean, this is what's so sad about where we're at in the decisions we make. I understand that we have to protect children, but that touch is powerful in helping to bring the body to a balanced state so that learning, both emotionally and cognitively, can happen. It can happen when we're in this overfiring of brain chemicals. So I love the thought of using a massage chair and helping to bring relaxation, bring that brain chemical state down, and then move children into the state of learning.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
And then who's our ambassador, Marian?
What?
Who's our ambassador? Caesar.
Oh. Yeah, so another aspect of what we're doing is canine assisted therapy. And Caesar, he's back here, I don't know if Caesar, can you say hi? You see him? Hey, Bubba. So Caesar is our canine ambassador. And what his role is he works with the kids at the center. He's with me in every session. Well, almost every session. There are certain ones when it's not appropriate. But he's with me in most sessions, and he has a very advanced skill set. Not only is he, therapeutic just because he's a dog, and just because, just having a dog present can bring down anxiety levels, can help a person feel more comfortable. Many of the teens will actually talk directly to him rather than me. It gives them an outlet to open up. The kids absolutely adore it. When they're petting him and loving on him, it's amazing to see the transformation that they experience. But then in addition, he's used in a very strategic way. He knows how to respond to specific states of kids. And so if a kid is dysregulated, he might lay down on their feet and roll over and give them a little bit of weight, because he's a 100-pound German Shepherd, white German Shepherd. If a kid is really sad, he might come over and just kind of lick their tears, lick their face, get giggling. And he does all this because he's learned that I like it when he does it, just through experience. That's been his training over the past 3 years in session. Is he's learned, because German Shepherds, they really do what their owner likes. They're not like a lab or a golden that's a lot more, I'm attuned to everyone in the room just because I want everyone to like me type, and I want everyone to be comfortable. German Shepherds are more of a one-person dog. But anyway, he's also used to help kids feel empowered. So often with my littles, I will have them walk him down the road and back. And it's kind of, I want to equate it to like you or I driving a muscle car, because you have a 40-pound kid walking a 100-pound German Shepherd, giving commands and having him listen. And sometimes I'll use him to help kids find their assertive voice, because I also have a command for him to listen to them, and I have to give it or he'll only listen to me. And so what I'll have them do is try to have him run through his series of commands, and he'll just ignore them. They'll sit next to him, but they'll try to get his attention. They'll snap their fingers. They'll do whatever they can. And this is usually used for kids that don't have an assertive voice, that have a quiet voice. And what I'll do is I'll wait until I hear that assertiveness in there, where they're starting to take control a little bit, and I'll do my little finger thing. And then he knows, and he just goes and looks directly at them and does exactly what he's being told. And then I use encouragement rather than praise, so I can build up that self-esteem. Encouragement is where you indicate to a child they did a good job, but you don't actually tell them good job. It's where you're jump starting this sense of self-worth and value. And it's like, I want to equate it to, like, if I usually use this idea of running a race. So if a child runs a race and they win, a parent runs down on the field and they pick them up and they're saying, "Great job, you're so fast. Oh my gosh, you did so awesome." And that's great. The child feels proud and happy and everything. But the next time that child runs the race, they have to come back to that parent and ask him, "Am I still fast? Am I still fast? Am I still fast?" Right? Because the parent came to the conclusion for them. That's external validation. The encouragement, however, would be same situation, same kid, same parent. He wins the race. Parent runs down on the field, picks him up and says, "Wow, you finished before everyone else," and stops. Right? And then the child says to themselves, what? "I'm fast." And the next time they run that race, all they have to do is look inside. Am I still fast? Yep. Am I still fast? Yep. And that's the difference. One of the things that we teach to the parents. And so using that technique, along with allowing Caesar to help that kid feel like they did something amazing, feel powerful, being able to command a 100-pound animal, is super, super effective. And I find I find it extremely valuable.
Yeah.
Marian, I'm so passionate about that. We have to develop the inner voice for a child for themselves. They really have to develop that. And we've become such a society of having to speak into, individuals, especially children, that we really, in some ways, we teach them that codependence, that they're dependent on understanding. So I definitely, with my kiddos, when they do artwork with me, even with my own children, I will always, when they say, "Do you like it?" my question to them first is always, "Do you like it? What do you think about it?"
What do you think?
I will always give you my feedback, but what is your perception of your work and of your response, of your attitude, of your experience, so that we can really teach people to know what it is that they are thinking and feeling, and then how to express that. It's such a powerful skill set. Yeah.
It's good.
So, ladies, I have we're getting close to our wrap up time. If you, in practical terms, for moms, dads, aunts, uncles, grandmas, grandpas, whatever out there, and dealing with children that might have a trauma brain, right? What would be, and they don't have services like you guys around them. What would be like one or two tips, kind of secret arsenal tips that you could encourage parents to begin to utilize?
Absolutely. That encouragement piece that Michelle and I were just talking about, that's huge, because that allows them to get to know themselves, to develop that inner working. And so Typically, I encourage parents only to use praise when changing a specific behavior, a very specific one, and to do so very, not very often. So that encouragement piece is really important. Teaching emotion vocabulary, that's huge. Telling a kid what they're feeling while they're feeling it, naming it for them so that they have a name for that. And they're able to reach back on that later in the future. And you start obviously, kind of generic, and then you work up to it, because we have a ton of different names for different emotions. And that helps with that emotional understanding and emotional intelligence. And then the final thing is, try to allow kids to come to their own conclusion. Let them try stuff on their own instead of doing it for them. That's how they're going to really build that sense of self-worth and value, work ethic, feeling proud and accomplished, and working through the I don't know, because we have a generation of I don't knows. Ask Google, right? If they don't know, they stop. Instead of saying, okay, I don't know right now, but my brain has a chance to search the Dewey Decimal System in there and find that answer and actually have it, or take different pieces and come to a conclusion. So if we take that extra time to allow the kids to work through the I don't know and come to the conclusion, it's really going to help them. And it'll help that trauma brain too.
Yeah, I piggyback all of what you're saying, Marian. It's absolutely right and true. And probably the one thing I speak the most is really modeling out loud for children how to express themselves. But first, that requires them to recognize what it is that they're feeling. And often we will say, you need to just tell me what you're feeling. While we know that that's an underdeveloped skill set. So as adults, the more that we can model out loud what we're feeling and how we respond, the more that we will teach kids without teaching at them how to begin to walk out their very process in their own life. So today, my heart is just beating fast a lot, and it's because I'm worried about the dog because he's been sick and I have to take him to the vet. So I feel a little sad today and a little worried, and I'm sorry that I didn't say that very kind to you, right? That it is okay for us to be vulnerable as adults and model out loud for children who haven't developed those skill sets, because our modeling is more powerful than any words that we can speak. So if I give you one gold nugget, it would be to never fear modeling out loud your own process.
Yes.
Good. Yeah.
That is so good, you guys. I am thinking like the whole, even the paradigm shift between praise and encouragement. I mean, that's going to take rewiring in most parents' brains anyway, right? Because from the time they start walking, what are we doing? Yeah, so amazing, So that's just kind of, I think, that default mechanism in parenting to just do praise. But that encouragement piece is so much more empowering. And I think that's just huge.
And you'd be surprised. It's actually you'd be surprised. It's actually not the kids that have a problem with it. They adhere to that. I mean, you would be surprised. You will see so much response to that in a positive way. It's the parents that have a hard time rewiring because we're so used to it. And it's a subtle but profound difference. And so it's generally the parent that gets frustrated and, at first when they're trying to learn this new skill, because they have those neural pathways created and they're used to societally, we do that. So anyway,
I love that. There's a quote, and I can't remember who. I mean, the first time I heard it was repeated to me from Lance Wallnau, and I can't remember if he got it from Jordan Peterson or who he got it from. But the quote was, "Would you rather have your child safe or strong?" And I was like, in that safe, as far as, I'm going to fix it for you and I'm going to create this safe bubble, or are you going to work through stuff with your child so that someday he has that strength inside of them when you're not around to work through that problem? It's kind of like, I'm just thinking the same thing with the praise, and the encouragement. I mean, praise is wonderful. We, love to lavish it on our kids, but you're so right that, one day if you're not there, And they're seeking the affirmation and the praise and the, versus from the inside, having that, inner empowerment. We really want to leave our children in a place where, honestly, they don't need us.
Exactly.
Yeah. And
that's
Melissa,
the whole point, right?
Yeah.
And if we can tweak that just a little bit, what we'll know is if we put this in right order, when our children are strong because we've built capacity in them and built them up with skill sets, they will be safe.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I just love this. This is so good, you guys. So if people want more information, I know you guys are both, you have a physical locality. I don't know if you guys have any online stuff or whatever. Where could they find you? And then I guess the other question would be, what I think is really unique is like you have Julie, who didn't have the, quote unquote qualifications and experience, but she had the passion and the burden. And then obviously, Papa God brought an amazing relationship with somebody that has the qualifications. So, there might be a lot of people out there that have the passion and the burden and maybe need a little bit of encouragement or hand holding or something from you guys to bring this into their community. But where can people go to get that information and reach out to you guys?
Well, for us, they can go to our website at www.elrodcenter.org. That's ELRODCENTER.org. And they can find all of that information on there. We will have online resources that we are working on. Due to COVID and things have been just kind of thrown it for a loop. So it's not there yet, but it's in the process. But there's all that other information on that webpage. And they can also get a hold of us. Our phone number's on there as well.
And Michelle, what about you?
Thank you, Melissa, for asking. I can be contacted on my website at resilientmindsconsulting.com, and I'm happy to help both with consulting around systems, supporting parents individually, and also providing individual support. So yes, thank you for asking.
Yes, lovely. We'll make sure to get both of those links on there, and so it's easy for people to be able to just click the link and find you guys. And thank you so much, so much. And Marian, I'm so sorry that you were locked out of your office and you had to do this entire show from your car. I hope you have air conditioning going and all that kind of stuff. I've been feeling actually tense, going, I hope her and the dog aren't getting too hot.
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay, good.
We're good.
Thank you for being so resilient to doing an entire program out of your car. That's awesome. So anyway, I usually ask our guests to pray us out and bless the audience and anybody watching and hearing. And I got both of you. So who wants to pray us out?
I don't mind. I'll absolutely do it. So, Father, we thank you so much for this amazing conversation, and we just pray over the seeds that were planted, that they would take root in hearts, that there would be understanding, that there would be revelation and knowledge that would be opened up in hearts to understand patterns of functioning, to understand and desire to walk in more freedom, that we would be impacting a generation of children and parents to bring heart work, Father, so that our hearts can be sensitive to relationship and ultimately changing culture. So we thank you for what you're doing today and speak your blessings over Melissa and Julie and Marian and all of our listeners. Thank you, Father.
Amen. Thank you, ladies. And THV Nation, we will see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.